The first light of dawn slipped through the gauzy curtains of Barbie's modest Brooklyn apartment, painting the room in hues of amber and gold. The air carried the faint hum of the city, waking up distant horns, the clatter of a delivery truck, the soft coo of pigeons on the fire escape. Barbie, an African-American woman, with a cascade of dark curls and eyes that held fire and fragility, stirred beneath the weight of a cotton sheet. Beside her, Ray slept soundly, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of untroubled dreams. His face, softened by sleep, bore an almost childlike innocence, starkly contrasting the complexities of the world Barbie had chosen to leave behind. She traced the curve of his jaw with her gaze, her lips curling into a tender smile, though a quiet unease lingered in her heart. Barbie had crafted this life with deliberate care, a delicate rebellion against the gilded cage of her upbringing. As the sole heiress to a Manhattan-based tech empire, her world had once been one of penthouse suites, private jets, and relentless expectations. Her father, a billionaire whose name was synonymous with innovation, had mapped out her future with the precision of a corporate merger. But Barbie, at 28, had grown weary of the suffocating weight of wealth, the constant scrutiny, the whispers of opportunists, the absence of genuine connection. A year ago, she had fled the opulence of her family's Upper East Side mansion, trading marble floors for creaky hardwood designer gowns, for thrift store jeans, and the title of CEO in waiting, for the anonymity of a barista in a Williamsburg cafe. In this cramped one-bedroom apartment, she was just Barbie, not Barbara de Reyes, the heiress whose every move was a headline. Yet even in this sanctuary of simplicity, the past refused to stay buried. Her phone, resting on the nightstand, buzzed with an insistent vibration, pulling her from the warmth of Ray's embrace. Careful not to wake him, she slipped out of bed, her bare feet brushing against the cool floor as she padded to the kitchen. The screen glowed with a familiar name, Zick. Her heart sank, a mix of affection and dread. Zick, her childhood bodyguard, a Caucasian man with a stoic demeanor and piercing blue eyes, had been her shadow since she was a girl. His loyalty was unwavering, but so was his insistence on pulling her back to the life she had abandoned. "Good morning, Miss Barbie." His voice came through low and measured, tinged with the formality that never quite faded, even after years. "Your father's been calling me since yesterday. He's worried. Says it's not safe for you to stay in that apartment alone. He wants you back at the mansion." Barbie's grip tightened on the phone, her voice a hushed whisper to avoid waking Ray. "Zick, how many times do I have to tell you I left that life for a reason? I don't want the luxury, the control, the constant eyes on me. I want to feel what it's like to be ordinary, loved for who I am, not what I have." There was a pause that carried the weight of Zick's unspoken thoughts. "Miss Barbie, your life isn't ordinary. You're the heir to de Reyes Tech. If anyone finds out where you are, you're at risk. You know there are people, competitors, enemies who'd do anything to get to your father through you." She glanced back at Ray, still asleep, oblivious to the storm brewing in her world. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and she felt a pang of protectiveness. Ray didn't know about her fortune lineage or the empire waiting for her. To him, she was just Barbie, the girl who laughed at his bad jokes and shared late-night pizza on the couch. She had guarded her secret fiercely, haunted by a memory that still stung, a college boyfriend who had wooed her with poetry and promises only to vanish when he learned her wealth was just a rumor. That betrayal had carved a wound deep enough to make her vow never to let love be tainted by money again. "Zick, please," she murmured, her voice trembling with conviction. "Don't tell anyone where I am, not even Dad. I need this time for myself, and I don't want Ray to know." He's different. He's here for me, not for what I can give him. Another pause longer this time. Ray, your boyfriend. He doesn't know who you are, does he? No, Barbie admitted, sinking into a chair at the small dining table. And I want it that way. Every man I've ever known came to me because of my name, my money. Even my ex left when he thought I was broke. But Ray, he's real. He stays, even though I've shown him nothing but this. She gestured to the modest apartment, its mismatched furniture and peeling paint. Zick's sigh crackled through the line. I understand, Miss Barbie, but one day he'll find out. And when he does, what if he feels betrayed? What if he thinks you've been lying to him? The question struck her like a cold wave. She hadn't considered that her secrecy could hurt Ray, that her omission might be seen as deceit. But for now, she could only protect the fragile happiness she'd found. She said, I'll deal with that when the time comes. Her voice firm, but laced with doubt. Just keep this between us, Zick. You're the only one I trust. Zick replied, You know I'd never betray you. His tone softening. I made a promise to your parents when you were just a kid. I'll always watch over you. But please don't put yourself in danger by hiding like this. Barbie nodded, though he couldn't see her. Thank you, Zick. I know I make things hard for you, but I need this right now. All right, he conceded, though she could hear the reluctance in his voice. I'll check in daily to make sure you're safe. Deal. Deal, she whispered, ending the call. She set the phone down, her hands trembling slightly as she covered her face. The weight of her double life pressed against her chest, the freedom she craved, clashing with the responsibilities she could never fully escape. She thought of her father's stern face, the boardroom meetings she'd fled, the whispers of corporate rivals who saw her as a pawn. But then her eyes drifted to Ray, and his simple, unassuming presence anchored her. His smile, how he held her hand, and how he made her laugh, were a lifeline, a reminder that love could be pure, untainted by wealth. Barbie Ray's sleepy voice broke the silence, pulling her from her thoughts. She turned to see him standing in the kitchen doorway, his hair tousled, wearing only a faded t-shirt and boxers. His half-closed eyes gave him the look of a boy just woken from a dream. Who were you talking to so early? Oh, just Zick, she said, forcing a smile. An old friend. He was checking in. Ray yawned, scratching his head. Sounds like you two are close. You've got a lot of stories you haven't told me, huh? Barbie's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. Not everything needs to be told all at once. We've got time. He grinned, stepping closer to ruffle her hair. Fine, keep your secrets. I don't care about your past, Barbie. All that matters is you're here with me now. Her heart warmed at his words, but a shadow lingered. As she pulled him into a playful hug, her phone buzz caught her attention again. This time a text from an unknown number. Be careful who you trust. Her breath caught, but she dismissed it as a prank, shoving the phone into her pocket. Yet as she laughed with Ray, the message lingered in her mind, like a dark whisper sowing the first seed of doubt in her carefully constructed world. The morning unfolded with the quiet intimacy of routine. Barbie brewed coffee, the rich aroma filling the small kitchen as she and Ray bantered over breakfast. He teased her about her terrible pancake flipping skills, and she retaliated by flicking flour at him, their laughter echoing through the apartment. The weight of her secret life lifted for a moment, replaced by the lightness of being loved. But the text message gnawed at her, a splinter in her thoughts she couldn't quite remove. As Ray left for his shift at a local auto shop, Barbie stood at the window, watching him disappear into the bustle of Brooklyn. The city pulsed with life, street vendors, calling out hipsters weaving through bike traffic, the distant wail of a siren. She loved this place, its raw energy, its unpolished truth. It was the opposite of the sterile perfection of her father's world. But Zick's words and that cryptic text stirred a restlessness she couldn't ignore. Was she truly safe here? Was Ray truly hers? Or was she building her happiness based on lies? She sank onto the couch, pulling a worn journal from a drawer. It was her sanctuary, where she poured out her fears and dreams. She wrote of Ray, of how his touch felt like home, of the fear that one day he'd see her as Barbara de Reyes, not Barbie, the girl who danced with him in the rain. She wrote of Zick, too, his steadfast presence, his quiet strength, the way his eyes seemed to see through her defenses. And she wrote of the text, its words looping in her mind. Who had sent it? A rival, a prankster, or someone closer, someone who knew more than she realized. As the day wore on, Barbie stepped out into the vibrant chaos of Brooklyn. The streets were alive with color graffiti murals, bodega signs, the kaleidoscope of faces from every corner of the world. She stopped at her favorite cafe, where she'd first met Ray. The memory flooded back. She'd dropped her wallet coins, scattering across the floor, and Ray, with his easy grin, had knelt to help her gather them. He'd joked about her being a walking disaster, and she'd laughed, feeling seen for the first time in years. That moment had sparked something, a belief that love could be simple, untainted by her past. But now, standing in the same cafe, she felt a chill. A man in a hoodie lingered at a corner table, his eyes flickering toward her before darting away. Was it paranoia, or was she being watched? She shook it off, ordering her usual latte, but the unease clung like damp air. As she left, her phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from Zick. I'm nearby if you need me. Stay sharp. Her fingers hovered over the screen, tempted to ask him to meet her, but she stopped herself. She wasn't ready to let her old life creep back in. Not yet. Back at the apartment, Barbie curled up with a book, trying to lose herself in its pages. But her thoughts drifted to Ray Zick and the life she'd left behind. She imagined her father in his office, surrounded by glass and steel, plotting to bring her back. She imagined enemies she'd never met, faceless figures who saw her as a means to an end. And she imagined Ray, his laughter, his warmth, the possibility that he was everything she needed or everything she feared. As night fell, Ray returned his arms, wrapping around her in a familiar embrace. Missed you, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. She melted into him, but her secrets pressed heavier than ever. The text message, Zick's warnings, and the man in the cafe swirled in her mind, a storm threatening to unravel the fragile peace she'd built. For now, she clung to Ray, to the illusion of simplicity. But deep down, she knew the truth was closing in, a shadow she could no longer outrun. The Brooklyn evening unfurled like a velvet curtain, the city's pulse softening into a gentle rhythm of streetlights and distant music. Barbie stood in her small kitchen, the scent of garlic and basil rising from a pot of simmering pasta. The apartment was bathed in the warm glow of a single lamp, casting long shadows across the walls. Ray sat at the dining table, his laughter filling the space as he recounted a story from his day at the auto shop, a customer's absurd complaint about a haunted car horn. His voice, rich with humor, wrapped around Barbie like a familiar melody, soothing the unease that had lingered since morning. Yet, beneath her smile, a quiet storm brewed, stirred by the cryptic text and Zick's persistent warnings. Barbie stirred the sauce, her movements deliberate, as if she could anchor herself in the simplicity of this moment. She glanced at Ray, his dark eyes sparkling with mischief, and felt a pang of longing for their shared life, a life untainted by her past. But the memory of that text, "Be careful who you trust," clung to her like a shadow. She pushed it aside, focusing on the clink of plates as she set the table on the way. Ray's hand brushed hers as he reached for a glass. This was her sanctuary, her rebellion against the world of wealth and power she'd left behind. Here she was, just Barbie, not the heiress whose name adorned skyscrapers in Manhattan. Dinner was a dance of laughter and stolen glances the evening that made Barbie believe in the possibility of forever. Ray leaned across the table, his fingers grazing her wrist, and told her she looked beautiful in the flickering candlelight. Her heart fluttered, but a flicker of doubt crept in unbidden. Was he too perfect, too easy with his charm? She banished the thought, chastising herself for letting Zick's words poison her trust. Ray was different. He had to be. As they cleared the dishes, Barbie's phone buzzed again, shattering the fragile calm. She hesitated, then glanced at the screen. Another unknown number. He's not who you think. Her breath caught her fingers trembling as she shoved the phone into her pocket. Ray noticed his brow furrowing. "Everything okay, babe?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "Just a spam text," she lied, forcing a smile. "You know the usual." He nodded, but his eyes lingered on her, searching. "You sure you've been a little off today?" Barbie laughed, the sound brittle. "Just tired. Long day at the cafe." He pulled her into a hug, his arms strong and reassuring. "You work too hard. Let's take a weekend away, just you and me. Somewhere quiet like the Catskills." The idea sparked a warmth in her chest, but the text's words echoed in her mind, a discordant note in their harmony. She nodded, murmuring agreement, but as Ray kissed her forehead, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The city outside hummed with secrets, and Barbie wondered if her own were the only ones at risk. The next morning, Barbie woke to find Ray already gone, and there was a note on the counter. "Early shift. See you tonight, love." She smiled, tracing his messy handwriting, but the apartment's quiet felt heavier than usual. She dressed quickly, pulled on a denim jacket, and headed to the cafe where she worked. The streets of Brooklyn were alive with color vendors selling empanadas, kids skateboarding past brownstones, the air thick with the scent of coffee and asphalt. She loved this neighborhood's grit and vibrancy, but today every glance from a stranger felt like a warning. At the cafe, she lost herself in the rhythm of steaming milk and taking orders, the chatter of customers, a welcome distraction. But during a lull, her thoughts drifted to Zick. She hadn't responded to his last text, and guilt gnawed at her. He was more than a bodyguard. He was a constant in her life, the one who'd bandaged her scraped knees as a child and driven her to prom when her date stood her up. His loyalty was a tether to her past and a reminder of the dangers she'd tried to escape. On her break, she slipped into the back alley, the cool air a relief against her flushed skin. She called Zick, her heart pounding as the line rang. "Barbie." He answered, his voice steady, but laced with urgency. "I was about to check on you." "Everything all right?" "I'm fine," she said, though her voice wavered. "But I got a weird text yesterday from an unknown number. It said to be careful who I trust." Zick's silence was deafening. When he spoke, his tone was clipped. "Please send it to me, now. And stay alert. I've heard rumors your father's competitors are sniffing around. They know you're not at the mansion, and they're looking for leverage." Barbie's stomach twisted. "You think they're watching me?" "It's possible," Zick said. "You're not just anyone, Barbie. You're the key to Dereye's tech. If someone finds you, they could use you to get to your father." She leaned against the brick wall, her breath shallow. "I want to live my life, Zick. I don't want to be a pawn in their games." "I know," he said softly, "but you can't hide forever." "And Ray? Have you told him anything?" "No," she snapped, then softened. "He doesn't need to know. He loves me for me." "Does he?" Zick's question was gentle, but piercing. "Barbie, I've seen guys like him before. Charming, easygoing, but sometimes there's more beneath the surface. Just be careful. Her jaw tightened. You don't know him, Zick. He's not like the others. I hope you're right, he said. But I'm meeting you tonight. Central Park near the Bethesda fountain. We need to talk in person. She agreed, though reluctance tugged at her. As she hung up, a figure caught her eye. A man in a hoodie lingering across the street, his face obscured. Her pulse quickened, but he turned and vanished into the crowd. Paranoia, she told herself, but the seed of doubt had taken root, its tendrils curling around her heart. That evening, Barbie met Zick in Central Park, the fountain's soft gurgle a counterpoint to the city's hum. He stood tall, his blonde hair catching the fading light, his blue eyes scanning the surroundings with practiced vigilance. He was dressed jeans, a leather jacket, but his presence commanded attention, a quiet strength that had always made her feel safe. Barbie, he said, his voice warm but edged with concern. You look like you haven't slept. She managed a weak smile, just a lot on my mind. He stepped closer, his gaze softening. I know this life means everything to you, but it's not as simple as you think. I checked the number from that text. It's untraceable, which means someone will have a lot of trouble getting your attention. Her breath hitched. You think it's about my father? Or you, he said. You're not invisible here, no matter how much you want to be. And Ray, have you noticed anything off about him? Anything at all? She bristled, folding her arms. He's been nothing but good to me, Zick. He doesn't know about my money or my family. He's not like that. Zick's jaw tightened, but he didn't push. I want you to be safe. That's all I've ever wanted. His words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Barbie remembered a moment from years ago when she was 16, lost in the chaos of a Manhattan gala. A man had cornered her, his intentions unclear, and Zick had appeared like a guardian, his presence enough to make the man retreat. She'd seen something in his eyes, then something beyond duty. Standing in the park, she wondered if she'd been blind to it all along. I'll be careful, she said finally. But I need you to trust me too. I know what I'm doing. Zick nodded, though his eyes betrayed his doubt. I'll always trust you, Barbie, but I'm not going anywhere. Not until I know you're safe. As they parted, Barbie felt the weight of his words and the text messages pressing against her. She walked home through the neon-lit streets, her mind tangled with love and fear. Ray was waiting when she arrived, his smile as warm as ever. But as he pulled her into his arms, she couldn't shake the memory of the man in the hoodie or the whisper of doubt that Zick had planted. She wanted to believe in Ray, in the life they were building, but the shadows of her past were closing in, and she feared they would tear her world apart. The Lower East Side pulsed with the electric heartbeat of a New York night, its streets awash in the glow of neon signs and the chatter of revelers spilling from dive bars and trendy lounges. Barbie sat across from Ray in a dimly lit booth at a bar called The Rusty Anchor, where the air was thick with the scent of craft beer and fried pickles. Her laughter mingled with the jukebox's soulful croon, her dark curls catching the light as she leaned closer to Ray, his easy grin anchoring her in the moment. Yet beneath the warmth of their shared glances, a shadow lingered, the cryptic texts, Zick's warnings, the hooded figure from the cafe. They were like notes in a discordant melody, threatening to unravel the harmony she'd fought to build. Ray's hand found hers under the table, his fingers intertwining with hers in a way that felt both familiar and fragile. He was telling a story about a coworker's botched attempt to fix a vintage Mustang, his voice rich with humor, his eyes alight with the charm that had first drawn her to him. Barbie wanted to lose herself in this moment, to believe their love was a fortress against the doubts creeping into her heart. But the weight of her secrets, her true identity as Barbara de Reyes, heiress to a tech empire, pressed against her chest, a silent reminder that her world was built on a delicate lie. As the bartender slid another round of drinks their way, Ray's demeanor shifted, his laughter fading into a quiet intensity. He leaned back, running a hand through his dark hair, his gaze dropping to the table. "Barbie," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "There's something I need to talk to you about." Her heart stuttered the memory of the second text. "He's not who you think," flashing through her mind. She forced a smile, her fingers tightening around her glass. "What's up, babe? You look serious all of a sudden." He exhaled, his shoulders slumping. "It's my mom. She had a stroke last night. She's in the hospital and the bills are piling up fast. We don't have enough savings to cover it. I hate asking, but I need help. Just a loan, I swear. I'll pay you back." The words hit Barbie like a wave, stirring a mix of empathy and unease. She saw the strain in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened as if the admission cost him something deep. Her instinct was to reach out and soothe his worry with her touch, but Zick's voice echoed in her mind. "Have you noticed anything about him?" She pushed the doubt aside, focusing on Ray's vulnerability. This was the man who'd held her through late-night talks and danced with her in the rain outside a Brooklyn bodega. He wasn't like the others, the men who'd seen her as a stepping stone to wealth. "Of course I'll help," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "How much do you need?" Relief flooded his face, his hand squeezing hers. "Barbie, you're incredible. I don't know what I'd do without you. It's not much, just enough for the down payment on her treatment, maybe 20,000. The number jolted her, but she nodded her mind, calculating the funds she kept hidden in a small safe under her bed. It wasn't her family's fortune, just her savings from working at the cafe, a modest sum she guarded fiercely to maintain her illusion of normalcy. "I've got you," she said, leaning forward to kiss his cheek. "We'll figure it out together." Ray's smile was radiant, but as he hugged her, Barbie caught a glimpse of a man at the bar watching them. He was lean, with a shaved head and a leather jacket, his eyes sharp and calculating. Her breath caught the memory of the hooded figure from the cafe resurfacing. Was it the same person? Before she could be sure, he slipped into the crowd, leaving her with a chill that lingered even in Ray's embrace. The next day, Barbie met Zick at a quiet bench in Central Park, the autumn leaves swirling around them like embers in the wind. The city's hum felt distant here, the rustle of trees, a soft counterpoint to the tension knotting her stomach. Zick stood as she approached his tall frame, cutting a striking silhouette against the golden light. His blue eyes, usually so guarded, softened as they met hers, but there was an edge to his posture, a vigilance that never wavered. "She said you didn't have to come settling onto the bench," her denim jacket pulled tight against the crisp air. "I told you I'm fine." "You're not fine," Zick replied, his voice low and steady. "Those texts aren't random, Barbie. I traced the second one, same as the first, untraceable. Someone's watching you and I don't like it." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "You're paranoid, Zick. It's a prank. Or maybe it's one of Dad's competitors trying to scare me." "Exactly," he said, his tone sharp. "You're not invisible, no matter how much you want to be. And Ray, I saw him last night, in Queens at a place called The Den. It's an underground casino, Barbie. He wasn't there to visit his mom." Her heart plummeted, the air suddenly too thin. "You're wrong," she snapped, though her voice trembled. "He told me about his mom. She's in the hospital. He needed money for her treatment." Zick's jaw tightened, but his eyes were gentle, almost pleading. "I'm not saying he's lying about his mom, but I saw him at a poker table, Barbie, throwing cash like it was nothing. I don't want to hurt you, but you need to know." Anger flared in her chest, hot and sharp. "You don't know him, Zick. You've never even met him. You're looking for reasons to drag me back to Manhattan, to that life I hate." I'm not, he said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I'm trying to protect you. I've always protected you since you were a kid sneaking out of that mansion to ride the subway. I was there when you cried over that jerk in college when he broke your heart because he thought you weren't rich enough. I see you, Barbie, not the heiress, but you. And I can't stand the thought of you getting hurt again. His words pierced her stirring memories of a younger Barbie lost and vulnerable with Zick as her silent guardian. She wanted to argue to defend Ray, but the image of him at a casino table gnawed at her. I need proof, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't just take your word for it. Zick nodded, pulling out his phone. I'll get it, but promise me you'll be careful. Please don't give him anything until we know for sure. She agreed, though her heart ached with the weight of doubt. As Zick walked away, his broad shoulders disappearing into the park's golden haze, Barbie felt a crack forming in the foundation of her world. She loved Ray, loved the life they'd built, but the whispers of betrayal were growing louder, and she feared they would drown out the music of her heart. That night, Barbie and Ray walked hand in hand through the streets of the Lower East Side, the city's pulse, a backdrop to their quiet conversation. They stopped at a food truck, the scent of tacos and grilled corn filling the air. Ray seemed lighter, his laughter easy as he teased her about her love for extra hot sauce. But Barbie's thoughts were elsewhere, replaying Zick's words, the image of the man at the bar, the cryptic texts. She watched Ray closely, searching for a sign, a flaw in his perfect facade, but found only the man she'd fallen for. Ray's phone buzzed as they sat on a stoop, sharing a paper boat of tacos. He glanced at it, his smile faltering for a split second before he shoved it back into his pocket. Just work, he said, but his voice was too quick, too casual. Who was it? Barbie asked, her tone light, but her eyes sharp. Nobody important, he said, leaning in to kiss her, just some guy from the shop. She let it go, but the moment lingered, a pebble in the stream of their evening. As they returned to the apartment, Barbie's phone vibrated in her bag. She waited until Ray was in the shower to check it. Another unknown number. Ask him where he was last night. Her heart pounded, her fingers trembling as she deleted the message, but its words burned into her mind. She wanted to believe in Ray, to hold fast to the love that had given her a taste of freedom, but the shadows were closing in, and she feared they would reveal a truth she wasn't ready to face. Rain streaked down the windows of Barbie's Brooklyn apartment. The city's skyline blurred into a mosaic of gray and silver. The storm had rolled in after midnight, its low rumble a mirror to the turmoil churning in Barbie's heart. She sat on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, a mug of chamomile tea cooling in her hands. The apartment was quiet, except for the rain patter and the occasional creak of the old building settling. Ray was out, his vague explanation, a quick errand echoing in her mind, like a half-forgotten melody. She wanted to trust him, to cling to the warmth of his laughter, but the seeds of doubt planted by Zick and those cryptic texts had taken root, their tendrils curling tighter with each passing hour. Her phone lay on the coffee table, its screen dark but heavy with secrets. The latest message, ask him where he was last night, had shaken her more than she cared to admit. She'd deleted it, but its words lingered, a ghost in the room. Zick's warning about the underground casino in Queens played on a loop in her mind, each repetition eroding her faith in Ray. She thought of their evenings together, the way he'd hold her close, his whispers of love soft against her ear. Could it all be a lie? The thought was a sharp and cold knife cutting through the fragile tapestry of her dreams. Barbie rose, pacing the small living room, her bare feet silent on the worn rug. She stopped at the window, watching the rain carve paths down the glass, each drop a reminder of the tears she'd shed over a past betrayal. Her college boyfriend Ethan had been charming too, His poetry had woven a spell around her, only to unravel when he learned her wealth was a myth. The memory stung a wound that had never fully healed. She'd vowed to guard her heart and seek a love untainted by her family's fortune. Ray had seemed like the answer, a man who saw her as Barbie, not Barbara de Reyes, heiress to de Reyes Tech. But now, doubt gnawed at her, whispering that she'd been blind again. Her phone buzzed, startling her. It was Zick, and his message was terse. "I have proof. Meet me at the cafe in Williamsburg. Now." Her heart raced, a mix of dread and determination. She grabbed her coat, the rain-soaked streets beckoning her into the night. The cafe, the same one where she'd met Ray, was a short walk away. Its neon sign, a beacon in the storm. Zick was waiting inside his leather jacket, slick with rain, his blue eyes sharp with urgency. He slid a phone across the table. A video paused on the screen. "Watch it," he said, his voice low but firm. "You need to see this." Barbie's fingers trembled as she pressed play. The video was grainy, taken in a dimly lit room with cigarette smoke. Men crowded around a poker table, voices a low hum of bets and curses. And there at the center was Ray, his face lit by neon lights, a stack of chips in front of him. He laughed, tossing a wad of cash onto the table, his movements casual, almost reckless. The video cut to another angle showing him borrowing money from a man in a leather jacket, the same man she'd seen at the Rusty Anchor. Her breath caught her vision blurring with unshed tears. "When was this?" she whispered. "2 nights ago." Zick set his tone gentle but unyielding. "The den in Queens. I followed him after you told me about his mom." "Barbie, he's not using your money for hospital bills. He's gambling it away." She shook her head, her voice breaking. "It could be a mistake. Maybe he was there for someone else." Zick leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "I checked the hospital records. His mom's stable, but there's no outstanding bill. He lied to you, Barbie. He's been lying all along." The words were a thunderclap, shattering the fragile hope she'd clung to. She pushed the phone away, her hands shaking. "Why are you doing this, Zick? Why can't you let me be happy?" he said. "Because I care about you." His voice was raw with emotion, more than you know. "I've watched you fight for this life, for a chance to be free, but I can't stand by and let you get hurt. Not again." His words stirred a memory, a night when she was 17, lost in the chaos of Times Square crowd. A man had grabbed her wrist, his intentions dark, and Zick had appeared, his presence a shield that sent the man running. She'd seen the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. Now, as he sat across from her, she saw that same fear mingled with something deeper, something she wasn't ready to name. "I need time," she said, her voice barely audible. "I need to talk to him." Zick nodded, though his jaw was tight. "I'll be here, Barbie. Whatever you need." She left the cafe, the rain soaking through her coat as she returned to the apartment. The city felt different now. Its vibrancy muted, its lights cold and accusing. She wanted to confront Ray, to demand the truth, but fear held her back. What if Zick was right? What if the man she loved was a mirage, a shadow cast by her own longing for something real? Ray was waiting when she returned, sprawled on the couch, his phone glowing. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're soaked," he said, standing to grab a towel. "Where'd you run off to?" "Just needed some air," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Ray, we need to talk." His smile faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "What's wrong, babe?" She took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "The money I gave you, for your mom. Where did it really go?" His eyes widened, but he recovered quickly, his voice smooth. "I told you, it's for her treatment." "Why are you asking?" "Because I know you were at a casino," she said, her voice trembling with anger and hurt in Queens. "I saw you, Ray. On video. Gambling with my money." For a moment, he was silent, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed, a hollow sound that chilled her. "You're spying on me now. Come on, Barbie. It was just a one-time thing. I was stressed and needed to blow off steam. The money's still for Mom, I swear." "Please don't lie to me," she snapped, her voice rising. "There's no hospital bill. I checked. You used me, Ray. You took my trust and threw it away." His face hardened, his charm replaced by something colder. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It's not like you're broke. You've got plenty to spare." The words were a slap, confirming her worst fears. She stepped back, her hands trembling. "Get out," she said, her voice low but firm. "We're done." Ray's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. "Are you breaking up with me about this? Fine. You'll regret it, Barbie. Can you toss me out? You don't know what I'm capable of." He grabbed his jacket, leaving a note on the table as he stormed out. "This isn't over." The door slammed, the sound echoing in the empty apartment. Barbie sank to the floor, her tears mingling with the rain still dripping from her hair. She felt broken and betrayed, but a spark of resolve flickered beneath the pain. She wasn't the naive girl who'd fallen for Ethan's lies. She was stronger now, and wouldn't let Ray's betrayal define her. As the rain continued to fall, Barbie's phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from Zick. "I'm outside. You okay?" She didn't respond, but the knowledge that he was waiting in the storm gave her a flicker of comfort. The truth had unraveled her world, but also set her free. And as she sat in the quiet, she knew the path ahead would be hers to forge, no matter how painful the journey. The Greenwich Village Cafe was a haven of warmth against the October chill, its windows fogged with the breath of steaming espresso and the soft murmur of patrons. Barbie sat in a corner booth, her dark curls spilling over the collar of a burgundy sweater, her fingers tracing the rim of a latte she hadn't touched. The city outside pulsed with its restless energy. Taxi horns, the clatter of heels on cobblestone, the faint strum of a busker's guitar. But here in this cocoon of amber light, time seemed to pause, holding her in a fragile limo. The confrontation with Ray 2 nights ago had left her raw, her heart a tapestry of frayed threads, each pulling her toward questions she wasn't ready to answer. The note he'd left. "This isn't over," lay heavy in her mind, a dark promise that shadowed her every step. She had come here to meet Zick, though her reasons felt muddled, a tangle of need and resistance. Since that rain-soaked night when she'd cast Ray out, Zick had been a quiet constant, his texts brief but steady, his presence a tether to a world she'd tried to flee. Barbie wanted to resent him for shattering her illusions about Ray, for thrusting the truth upon her like a blade, but she couldn't. His warning saved her from a more profound betrayal, yet they exposed the fragility of the life she'd built in Brooklyn. She was no longer just Barbie the barista with a penchant for late-night tacos. She was Barbara de Reyes, heiress to a tech empire, and the weight of that truth pressed against her like a storm cloud. The cafe door chimed, and Zick stepped inside, his tall frame cutting through the haze of cigarette smoke and coffee fumes. His blonde hair caught the light, his blue eyes scanning the room with the vigilance of a man trained to see threats in shadows. He wore a simple navy jacket, but his presence was magnetic, drawing glances from nearby tables. As he approached, Barbie felt a flutter in her chest. Not attraction, she told herself, but the comfort of familiarity, of someone who had seen her at her most vulnerable and never looked away. "Barbie," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. His voice was low, a gentle rumble that seemed to steady the chaos in her mind. "You look like you haven't slept." She managed a wry smile, tucking a curl behind her ear. "Is it that obvious? I thought I was hiding it well." "You can't hide from me," he said, his tone soft, but laced with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I know you too well." She looked away, her gaze settling on the rain-slicked street outside. "That could be the problem, Zick. You see too much." He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his eyes searching hers. "I see you hurting Barbie, and I hate it. I hated showing you that video and telling you about Ray, but I couldn't let you keep believing in someone who was using you." Her fingers tightened around her mug, the warmth grounding her. "I know you were right," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it doesn't make it easier. I thought he loved me. I thought I'd finally found something real." "You did," Zick said, his voice firm but tender. "You found a life you chose where you're more than your last name. And you'll find love again, Barbie. Real love. The kind that doesn't come with a price tag." She met his gaze, and for a moment the world narrowed to the space between them. There was something in his eyes, something raw, unguarded, that she hadn't noticed before. Or perhaps she had, but she'd pushed it aside too, consumed by her dream of Ray to see it. "Why do you care so much, Zick?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of curiosity and fear. "You're my bodyguard, not my therapist. Why does it matter to you if I get hurt?" He exhaled, his jaw tightening, as if wrestling with words he'd held back for years. "Because it's not just a job, Barbie," he said finally, his voice low and fervent. "It never was. I've been by your side since you were a kid, watching you grow and fight for your own path. I've seen you laugh, cry, break, and rebuild yourself. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you." The confession hung in the air, a fragile thing that seemed to shimmer in the cafe's soft light. Barbie's heart stuttered, her breath catching as she processed his words. Zick, her stoic protector, the man who'd stood in the shadows of her life, loved her. It was a revelation that warmed and terrified her, a spark in the darkness of her shattered trust. "Zick, you can't," she started, her voice faltering. "You can't just say that. Not now. Not after everything." "I know," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know it's the worst time, but I couldn't keep it in anymore. Not when I see you hurting or realize you deserve better than what Ray gave you. I've loved you since you were 16, Barbie. When you snuck out to that concert in Harlem, I had to drag you back before your dad noticed. I loved you when you cried over that idiot in college, when you stood up to your father's boardroom vultures. I love you now, not because of your name or your money, but because you're you. Brave, stubborn, beautiful." Her throat tightened, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She remembered that night in Harlem, the thrill of rebellion, Zick's quiet exasperation as he pulled her from the crowd. She remembered his hand on her shoulder after Ethan's betrayal, his silent presence, a balm to her pain. But love. The word felt like a foreign language she wasn't ready to speak. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her hands trembling. "I'm a mess right now, Zick. My heart's in pieces. I can't think about this." He said, "I'm not asking you to," his voice gentle, but resolute. "I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. I'll wait, Barbie. I've waited this long, and I'll keep waiting no matter how long it takes." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man behind the bodyguard, the boy from Ohio, who'd fought his way out of a small-town life, who'd chosen loyalty over ambition, who'd seen her at her worst and still found her worth loving. It was too much too soon, yet it stirred something in her, a flicker of possibility she wasn't ready to embrace. "I need time," she said, her voice breaking. "I need to figure out who I am without Ray, without all of this." "I know," Zick said, his smile soft, but tinged with pain. "And I'll be here, Barbie. Always." The rain stopped as they left the cafe, leaving the village streets glistening under the streetlights. Barbie walked home alone, her thoughts a whirlwind of Zick's confession and Ray's betrayal. The city felt alive, its pulse a reminder that she too was alive despite the cracks in her heart. But as she reached her apartment, her phone buzzed with another text from an unknown number. "You think you know him, but you don't." Her blood ran cold. The message a stark reminder that the shadows of her past were still watching, waiting to pull her back into their grasp. The Brooklyn apartment was a sanctuary turned battlefield, its walls echoing the ghosts of Barbie's shattered dreams. She stood by the window, the city's skyline, a blur of steel and light against the twilight sky. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt, a reminder of the storm that had raged the night she'd confronted Ray. His note, "This isn't over," sat on the coffee table, its edges worn from her restless fingers. She hadn't seen him since, but his absence was a presence, a shadow that lingered in every corner of her life. Zick's confession in the village cafe had added another layer of complexity. His words, a melody she couldn't yet sing, a promise she wasn't ready to trust. Barbie's phone lay silent, but the latest text, "You think you know him, but you don't," burned in her memory. Was it about Ray or Zick? The ambiguity gnawed at her, a puzzle she couldn't solve. She had spent the day at the cafe pouring lattes and forcing smiles, but her thoughts were elsewhere, replaying the video of Ray at the casino, his laughter as he tossed her money onto the poker table. The betrayal cut deeper than she'd expected, not just because of the lies, but because it exposed her naivety. She had wanted so badly to believe in him, that love could be simple, untainted by her past. The door creaked open, and Ray stepped inside his presence, jarring against the quiet. His dark hair was disheveled, his jacket rumpled, but his smile was as disarming as ever. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice smooth as if the past few days hadn't happened. "And I missed you." Barbie's heart clenched a mix of longing and fury. She crossed her arms, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "What are you doing here, Ray? I told you we're done." His smile faltered, but he stepped closer, his hands raised in peace. "Come on, Barbie. Don't be like that. I messed up. Okay, I got caught up in some bad stuff, but it's not what you think. I love you." Her laugh was sharp, cutting through the air. "Love you call gambling away my money. Love you lied to me, Ray. You said it was for your mom, but there was no hospital bill. You used me." His eyes darkened, a flicker of something anger, desperation crossing his face. "You're blowing this out of proportion. I was stressed all right, I needed a break. The casino was just a one-time thing. I'm still paying for Mom's care, I swear." "Don't," she snapped, her voice rising. "I checked Ray. There's no outstanding bill. You took my money, my savings, everything I've worked for, and threw it away on cards and chips. How could you?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a pleading whisper. "Barbie, I'm sorry. I got in over my head. But I love you. You know that. We can work through this. Just give me another chance." Her resolve wavered, the memory of their shared moments, late-night walks, stolen kisses in the rain, tugging at her heart. But then she saw the video in her mind. His careless laughter, the stack of chips. She saw Zick's face, his raw honesty in the cafe, his love laid bare. And she saw herself, the woman she'd become, no longer willing to be a pawn in someone else's game. "No," she said, her voice firm, a steel edge honed by pain. "You don't get another chance. You broke my trust, Ray. You broke me." His face hardened, the charm slipping away like a mask. "Can you toss me out? You don't know what I'm capable of, Barbie. You'll regret this." The words echoed his note, sending a chill down her spine. She stepped back, her hands trembling but her gaze unwavering. "Get out," she said, her voice a low growl. "Now." Ray's eyes narrowed, but he grabbed his jacket, pausing at the door. "This isn't Over, he said, his voice cold. You'll see. He slammed the door, the sound reverberating through the apartment, a final note in their discordant symphony. Barbie sank onto the couch, her body shaking with the weight of what she'd done. Tears came hot and unbidden, but they were not just for Ray. They were for the girl she'd been, the one who'd believed love could be simple and thought she could outrun her past. She thought of Zick, his confession, a beacon in the darkness, but even that felt too heavy too soon. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. Another text from an unknown number. He's closer than you think. Her heart raced, fear mingling with anger. Was Ray watching her? Or was this something else, something tied to her father's enemies? She called Zick, her voice trembling as she recounted the confrontation. I'm outside, he said, his tone calm but urgent. Stay where you are. I'm coming up. Minutes later, he was there, his presence a quiet strength in the storm of her emotions. He didn't touch or crowd her. He just stood by the window, eyes scanning the street below. You did the right thing, he said softly. You're stronger than you know. I don't feel strong, she admitted, wiping her tears. I feel like I've lost everything. You haven't, he said, turning to face her. You've lost a lie. And you've gained yourself. That's more than most people ever do. His words were a lifeline, but the weight of the text of Ray's threat pressed against her. Zick, what if he comes back? What if he knows who I am? Zick's jaw tightened, his eyes fierce. He won't touch you. I'll make sure of it. But Barbie, you need to think about coming clean. Not just to protect yourself, but to live without secrets. You deserve that. She nodded through the thought of revealing her identity to anyone. Felt like stripping away her armor. As Zick left, promising to stay close, Barbie stood alone in the apartment, the city's hum a distant lullaby. She was no longer the naive girl who'd fallen for Ray's charm, but wasn't yet the woman she needed to be. The truth had shattered her illusions, but it had also lit a path forward, one she would have to walk alone, at least for now. The Upper East Side mansion loomed like a cathedral of glass and stone, its marble facade gleaming under the Manhattan sun. Barbie stepped out of Zick's sleek black SUV, her dark curls catching the breeze, as she gazed up at the home she'd fled a year ago. The air was crisp, scented with the faint musk of autumn leaves and the distant hum of Fifth Avenue. This was no longer her sanctuary. It was a battlefield where her past and present collided with the force of a gathering storm. The confrontation with Ray, his chilling parting words, "This isn't over," and Zick's unexpected confession in the Greenwich Village Cafe had unraveled the fragile threads of her Brooklyn life. Now standing before the mansion, Barbie felt the weight of her true identity. Barbara de Reyes, heiress to de Reyes Tech, settle over her like a heavy cloak. Zick stood beside her, his tall frame, a quiet pillar of strength, his blue eyes scanning the surroundings with the vigilance that had defined him since her childhood. He was more than her bodyguard. Now his love laid bare in the cafe, but Barbie pushed that thought aside, her heart too bruised to entertain it. The cryptic texts, "He's closer than you think," still haunted her, a riddle she couldn't solve. Were they about Ray, or something darker tied to the enemies of her father's empire? She straightened her shoulders, her burgundy coat a splash of color against the mansion's austere elegance, and stepped forward, Zick a silent shadow at her side. Inside the grand foyer unfolded in a symphony of opulence. Crystal chandeliers, polished mahogany, a sweeping staircase that seemed to ascend to the heavens. Barbie's father, Jonathan de Reyes, sat in a leather armchair by a roaring fireplace, his dark suit contrasting with the room's warmth. His presence was commanding, his eyes sharp with the intellect that had built a tech empire from nothing. At his side stood the family lawyer, a wiry man with a tablet in hand, and 2 bodyguards, their faces impassive. Barbie's heart clenched at the sight of her father, a mix of love and dread. She hadn't seen him since she'd left her departure, a silent rebellion against his control. "Barbie," he said, his voice a low rumble, both stern and tender. He rose, his gaze softening as he approached. "You've finally come home." She stepped forward, her hand brushing his in a gesture of respect, though her voice was cautious. "Papa, I'm here because I needed to see you, not because I'm staying." His eyes narrowed, a flicker of frustration crossing his face. "You've been hiding, Anak. Do you know how many calls I've gotten? Reports about your boyfriend, Ray. People have seen him, Barbie. In places he shouldn't be. Gambling dens, shady bars. He's using you, and I won't stand for it." The words struck like a whip, echoing Zick's warnings, and the damning video of Ray at the Queen's Casino. Barbie's throat tightened, but she held her ground, her voice steady. "I know, Papa. I found out. I ended it." Jonathan's expression softened, but his tone remained firm. "Good. But you can't keep running, Barbie. You're my daughter, the future of Heiress Tech. You can't hide in Brooklyn forever pretending to be someone you're not." "I wasn't pretending," she said, her voice rising with a fire she hadn't felt in months. "I was living. For the first time, I was free." "But Ray," she faltered, the memory of his betrayal a fresh wound. "He wasn't who I thought." Zick stepped forward, his presence a quiet reassurance. "Sir, I've been watching her like you asked. Ray's out of the picture, but I'm concerned about those texts she's been getting. They're untraceable, and they're escalating." Jonathan's gaze sharpened, turning to Barbie. "Texts? What texts?" She hesitated, then pulled out her phone, showing him the latest message. "He's closer than you think." Her father's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with a protective fury. "This is why you can't stay out there alone," he said. "You're a target, Barbie. Not just because of me, but because of who you are. I've had reports of competitors sniffing around people who'd love to use you to get to me." Barbie sank into a velvet sofa, her hands clasped tightly. "I just wanted to be normal, Papa. To be loved for me, not for Heiress Tech." Jonathan knelt before her, his voice softening. "I know, Anak. But love doesn't mean hiding who you are. You're stronger than you realize. You're my daughter, and you'll rise above this." Tears stung her eyes, but she nodded, his words a balm to her wounded heart. Yet as she looked at Zick standing silently by the door, she saw the same fierce protectiveness in his eyes, tempered by something more profound, something she wasn't ready to name. The meeting ended with her father's promise to tighten security, and Barbie agreed to return to her role as CEO, if only to reclaim her power. Back in Manhattan, Barbie threw herself into her work, the penthouse office of Heiress Tech, which was a stark contrast to her Brooklyn apartment. The city stretched out below, a glittering tapestry of ambition and secrets. She used her influence to ensure Ray couldn't find work, her anger a quiet fire that fueled her decisions. She learned through Zick that Ray had been arrested, caught in a police raid on the Queen's Casino, his life unraveling as swiftly as he'd unraveled hers. The news brought a bitter satisfaction, but also a pang of guilt. Had she gone too far? One evening, Barbie stood in her office, the skyline aglow with the city's restless pulse. Zick entered, his face grim. "I found something," he said, handing her a file. "Ray was in contact with someone from a rival company, Vortex Dynamics. They've been digging into your family's dealings. Maybe he knew who you were. Maybe not at first, but toward the end." The revelation was a knife twisting in her chest. Ray hadn't just betrayed her heart. He'd played a deeper game tied to the enemies her father had warned her about. "I want to see him," she said, her voice cold in jail. "I need to know why." Zick hesitated, then nodded. "I'll arrange it. But Barbie, be careful. He's not worth your pain." The next day, Barbie stood in a Manhattan detention center's sterile visitors' room, the air heavy with disinfectant and despair. Ray sat across from her, separated by a glass partition, his once charming face haggard, his eyes dull with defeat. "Barbie," he said, his voice a ghost of its former warmth. "You came." She crossed her arms, her gaze icy. "I came to understand why, Ray. Why did you lie? Why did you use me? Did you know who I was? Were you working with Vortex Dynamics?" His eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing his face. "I didn't. Not at first. I swear. I found out later from a guy at the casino. He said you were loaded, that I could make a deal. But I loved you, Barbie. I messed up, but it was real." Her laugh was sharp, cutting through the air. "Real. You gambled away my money, Ray. You sold me out to people who'd hurt my family. That's not love. That's greed." He leaned forward, his hands pressed against the glass. "I'm sorry. Please help me get out of here. I'll make it right." She stood, her voice steady as steel. "You made your choices, Ray. And now you'll live with them. Just like I'm living with mine." She turned, her heels echoing on the linoleum, leaving him with the weight of his own ruin. As she stepped into the Manhattan night, Zick was waiting by the car, and Barbie felt a shift within her. She was no longer the girl hidden in Brooklyn chasing a dream of simplicity. She was Barbara de Reyes, and she would reclaim her life, even if it meant facing the shadows that hunted her. The Hudson Yards Park was a quiet oasis amidst Manhattan's clamor, its pathways lined with golden maples and sleek sculptures that caught the late afternoon light. Barbie sat on a bench, her dark curls swept back by a silk scarf, her eyes tracing the slow dance of leaves falling to the ground. The city's pulse felt distant here, its relentless energy softened by the rustle of trees and the gentle ripple of the Hudson River. Yet within her, a storm still lingered, the ache of Ray's betrayal, the weight of her return to de Reyes Tech, the echo of Zick's confession in the Greenwich Village Cafe. She was no longer the naive girl who'd fled to Brooklyn, but she wasn't yet whole, her heart a mosaic of cracks she wasn't sure how to mend. Her office at de Reyes Tech had become both a refuge and a cage, its glass walls reflecting the city's ambition at her. She'd thrown herself into her role as CEO, her days filled with board meetings and strategic plans, her nights haunted by the memory of Ray's face behind the prison glass. Her swift vengeance ensured he'd find no foothold in New York's corporate world. But the victory tasted bitter. Had she become the kind of person who wielded power to wound? The question gnawed at her, a shadow that followed her even here in this quiet park. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a letter forwarded by Zick from Ray's mother. The words were simple, written in a trembling hand. "I'm sorry for what my son did, Barbie. He promised me he'd change, but he broke my heart too. I appreciate your kindness, even if he didn't deserve it." The letter was a balm, easing the guilt in her chest. Ray's mother didn't blame her, and that small absolution allowed Barbie to let go and turn her gaze forward. She looked up as Zick approached his tall frame, moving with a quiet grace that belied his strength. His blonde hair glinted in the sunlight, his blue eyes soft with a concern that had become as familiar as her heartbeat. He carried a small paper bag, a gesture she'd recognize as his way of offering comfort without words. "Thought you might need a pick-me-up," he said, handing her a coffee from her favorite Brooklyn cafe. She smiled, the warmth of the cup seeping into her hands. "You didn't have to do that, Zick. You're always doing too much." He sat beside her, his presence steady, but not intrusive. "It's not too much if it's for you," he said, his voice low, a melody that stirred something deep within her. "How are you holding up?" She sighed, her gaze drifting to the river. I don't know. Coming back to Manhattan and taking control would make me feel stronger. But I believe just empty. Like I've lost something I can't get back. Zick said you haven't lost yourself, his tone firm, but gentle. You've lost a version of you that wasn't real. A version that believed in someone who didn't deserve it. But the real Barbie. She's still here, stronger than ever. His words were a lifeline pulling her from the depths of her doubt. She thought of their history, the nights he'd driven her home from galas, the mornings he'd stood guard outside her school, the quiet moments when he'd seen her tears and never judged. His confession in the cafe had shaken her, but it had also planted a seed, a possibility she was afraid to nurture. Zick, she said, her voice soft. Why do you stay? After everything, my stubbornness, my mistakes, why don't you walk away? He turned to her, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Because you're worth it, Barbie. You always have been. I've seen you fight for your freedom and heart, even when it hurt. I've seen you stand up to your father, to the world. I stay because I believe in you, not the heiress, but the woman who laughs at bad jokes, dances in the rain, and never gives up. Her heart fluttered, a fragile thing, stirring in the ashes of her pain. She wanted to push him away to protect herself from the vulnerability his words evoked, but she couldn't. Not when he looked at her like she was the only truth that mattered. I'm not ready, she said, her voice breaking. My heart's too broken to love again. Not now. I know, he said, his smile soft but unwavering. And I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to let me stay, to let me show you that love doesn't have to hurt. She nodded, tears prickling her eyes. Okay, she whispered. But don't expect miracles, Zick. I'm a mess. He said, you're my kind of mess. His voice warm with a humor that made her laugh despite herself. As they sat in the park, the city fading into a golden haze, Barbie felt a shift within her. The letter from Ray's mother, Zick's steadfast presence, and her father's quiet support were threads weaving a new tapestry of healing and hope. But as she stood to leave, her phone buzzed with another text. You can't hide forever. Her breath caught fear mingling with resolve. The shadows were still out there, but she was no longer running. She was Barbara de Reyes, and she would face them one step at a time. The Hudson River sparkled under the late November sun, its surface a canvas of silver and gold as it wound past the sleek restaurants of Manhattan's West Side. Barbie sat at a small table by the window of a riverside bistro, her dark curls catching the light, her eyes tracing the gentle ripples of the water. The city's hum was a distant lullaby, softened by the clink of wine glasses and the murmur of diners wrapped in their stories. She wore a simple cream blouse. Its elegance understated a reflection of the woman she was becoming. Neither the heiress of de Reyes Tech, nor the barista of Brooklyn, but something new forged in the crucible of her pain and resilience. The weight of Ray's betrayal, the sting of his connection to vortex dynamics, and the cryptic texts that had haunted her. You can't hide forever still lingered, but they were shadows now fading in the light of her healing heart. Zick sat across from her, his blue eyes warm with a quiet intensity, his blonde hair slightly tousled by the autumn breeze that had followed them inside. He was different here, away from the stoic armor of his bodyguard days, his navy sweater softening the lines of his strong frame. Since their meeting in Hudson Yards, he had been a steady presence, not pushing, not demanding, but simply there, offering coffee from her favorite Brooklyn cafe, leaving notes with quotes from her favorite novels, planning quiet outings like this one. Tonight, he'd suggested this bistro, a place known for its jazz nights, and Barbie had agreed, her heart stirring with a cautious hope she was only beginning to name. You're quiet tonight, Zick said, his voice a gentle melody that cut through the soft strains of a saxophone from the stage. Everything okay? She smiled, a slight, genuine curve of her lips. Just thinking. It's been a while since I felt calm, like I can breathe without looking over my shoulder. He leaned forward, his gaze steady but tender. You deserve that, Barbie. You fought for it. Her fingers toyed with the stem of her wine glass, the ruby liquid catching the candlelight. I'm not sure I've won yet, she admitted. Ray's gone, but those texts, they still make me wonder. What if someone's still out there watching? Zick's jaw tightened, a flicker of protectiveness in his eyes. I've got people looking into it. The texts stopped, didn't they? That's a good sign. But I'm not taking any chances. You're safe, Barbie. I promise. His words were a balm, soothing the lingering fear that had shadowed her since Brooklyn. She thought of the letter from Ray's mother. Its words were a quiet absolution that had helped her release the guilt of her vengeance. She thought of her father, Jonathan, whose stern love had anchored her return to Manhattan. And she thought of Zick, whose steadfast presence had become a lighthouse in her storm. His confession in the village cafe had shaken her, but it had also planted a seed that was beginning to bloom in the quiet moments they shared. Zick, she said, her voice soft, tell me something about you. Something I don't know. You've been in my life forever, but I feel like I've only seen pieces of you. He chuckled, a low, warm sound that sent a shiver through her. You want my secrets? All right. He paused, his gaze drifting to the river as if searching for the right words. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, in a house that always smelled like motor oil and my mom's apple pie. My dad was a mechanic, tough as nails, but soft when it mattered. I was the kid who dreamed of something bigger, who'd sneak into the library to read about places like New York. When I got the chance to come here to work for your family, it felt like fate. But meeting you, that changed everything. Barbie's heart fluttered, her eyes searching his. Changed how? He met her gaze, his voice steady, but laced with emotion. You were this whirlwind of a girl, fearless, stubborn, constantly pushing boundaries. I watched you grow, and how you fought for your own path, even when it hurt. I told myself I was doing my job, keeping you safe, but it was more than that. You made me believe in something bigger than myself. Her breath caught the weight of his words, settling over her like a warm blanket. She remembered a moment from her teenage years when she'd snuck out to a dive bar in the Bronx, chasing a band she loved. Zick had found her, his face a mix of exasperation and relief, but he'd stayed listening to the music with her until dawn. That memory and countless others wove a tapestry of trust she hadn't fully appreciated until now. She admitted, I don't know how to do this, her voice trembling. You're everything I didn't expect, Zick, but my heart's still healing. I'm scared of getting it wrong again. He reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers, waiting for permission. I'm not asking you to rush, Barbie. Please let me be here to show you what love can be when it's real. No games, no lies. Just us. She nodded her fingers, brushing his, a tentative touch that sent a spark through her. Okay, she whispered. But slow, Zick. I need to slow down. He smiled, his eyes alight with a hope that mirrored her own. Slow's my specialty. As the jazz band played a soulful ballad, Barbie felt a shift within her, a quiet blooming of something new. The city outside pulsed with life, but here in this moment, she was just Barbie, a woman daring to believe in love again. Yet, as they left the bistro, her phone buzzed with a new text. He's out. Watch your back. Her heart raced the words, a chilling reminder that Ray, now free from jail, might still be a shadow in her world. She showed Zick, his face hardening, but he took her hand, his grip a promise of protection. I've got you, he said, his voice a vow. No matter what. As they walked into the Manhattan night, Barbie clung to that promise, her heart teetering on the edge of hope and fear. The river flowed beside them, a silent witness to her journey, and she knew that whatever lay ahead, she would face it with Zick by her side. 6 years later, the Connecticut countryside unfolded in a tapestry of emerald fields and golden sunlight, a far cry from the steel and glass of Manhattan. Barbie stood on the veranda of a sprawling farmhouse, her dark curls swept back by a gentle breeze, her eyes tracing the horizon where the fields met the sky. The air was sweet with the scent of wildflowers and freshly cut grass, and the children's laughter was a melody that filled her heart. She wore a simple white dress, its fabric soft against her skin, a symbol of the life she'd built, a life rooted not in wealth or power, but in love, hard-won and fiercely cherished. Zick stood beside her, his blonde hair now streaked with the faintest hints of silver, his blue eyes warm with a contentment that had deepened over the years. He was no longer just her bodyguard, or the man who'd confessed his love in a Greenwich Village cafe. He was her husband, her partner, the father of their 3 children, Adrian, Arwen, and Althea, who tumbled across the lawn, their giggles rising like bubbles in the summer air. The farmhouse with its creaking porch and ivy-clad walls was their sanctuary, where the shadows of Barbie's past, Ray's betrayal, the cryptic texts, the weight of her family's empire, had faded into memory. Barbie leaned against the railing, her gaze settling on Adrian, their eldest, a 5-year-old whirlwind with her curls and Zick's determination. He chased Arwen, a 4-year-old, with a mischievous grin across the grass, while Althea, their 3-year-old, sat in a patch of daisies, her tiny hands clutching a wooden toy. The sight filled Barbie with a warmth that felt like sunlight, a reminder of how far she'd come since those dark days in Brooklyn. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the pain of Ray's lies, the courage it took to confront him in that Manhattan jail, the slow, tender unfolding of her love for Zick. Wife Zick set his voice a playful tease as he sipped coffee from a chipped mug. "You're awfully quiet. Plotting world domination or just enjoying the view?" She laughed, the sound bright and unburdened. "Just thinking about how we got here. 6 years, Zick. Sometimes it feels like a dream." He stepped closer, his hand finding hers, his touch as familiar as her heartbeat. "A good dream, I hope." "The best," she said, her eyes meeting his. "But it wasn't easy. I was so scared back then, so sure I'd never trust again. And you just kept showing up." He grinned, his thumb tracing circles on her hand. "You made it hard, Barbie. You pushed me away during those times and told me I was crazy for sticking around. But I knew you were worth it." She remembered their early days when Zick's persistence had been a quiet force, his gestures small but profound. A book left on her desk, a ticket to a Carnegie Hall concert, a late-night walk along the Hudson, where he'd shared stories of his Ohio childhood. Those moments had chipped away at her walls, revealing a steady, unshakable love, unlike anything she'd known with Ray. She remembered the night she'd finally let him in, a quiet dinner in their Connecticut home, when she'd kissed him under the starlit sky, her heart finally ready to bloom. "Daddy, Mommy." Adrian's voice broke through his small frame, barreling toward them. "Play hide and seek." Zick laughed, scooping him up. "You think you can outsmart your old man? Let's see it." Barbie joined them, her dress fluttering as she ran across the lawn, Althea's tiny hand in hers. The children's laughter was a symphony, filling the air with eternal joy. As they played, Barbie caught Zick's eye, his smile a mirror to her own. This was their life now, a family forged in time, built on trust and love that had weathered every storm. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of lavender and rose, Barbie and Zick sat on the porch, the children asleep inside. Zick's contacts in New York forwarded a letter that had arrived that morning. It was from Ray, now living in a small town in upstate New York, where he'd opened a modest auto shop. "I've changed, Barbie," he wrote. "I know I hurt you, and I'll carry that regret forever. But I'm trying to be better for myself and for my mom. I hope you found peace." The words had stirred a quiet relief in her, a final release of the anger she'd once held. She'd forgiven him not for his sake, but for her own, to free herself from the past. "Zick," she said, her voice soft as she leaned against him. "Do you ever think about where we'd be if I hadn't given you a chance?" He chuckled, his arm wrapping around her. "I'd still be chasing you, leaving coffee on your doorstep, hoping you'd notice me." She laughed, nudging him playfully. "You're impossible, and you're everything," he said, his voice dropping to a tender whisper. "I thank the stars daily for you, this life, and our kids. You're my home, Barbie." Her heart swelled, tears prickling her eyes as she squeezed his hand. "And you're mine, always." As the stars emerged, a constellation of promises kept, Barbie felt a profound gratitude for the journey that had led her here. The shadows of her past, Ray, the texts, the weight of her family's name had faded, replaced by a genuine love, a family that was hers. The Connecticut night wrapped around them, a gentle embrace, and Barbie knew that no matter what lay ahead, she and Zick would face it together, their love, a beacon that would never dim. Join us in celebrating the power of love and resilience. In the comments below, share your stories of overcoming heartbreak and finding genuine connection.